Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, the Swansea City podcast. I'm Guto and with me this evening is Steve Carroll. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very good, because we've got a win to discuss. Though first home win of the season, only our second win overall, and that's where we're going to start, Steve. Huddersfield Town, dare I say it, a very comfortable 1-0 victory for the Swans.
Yeah, it was. The only criticism I suppose we could level at them was that should really have been more comfortable, shouldn't it? The first half was very dominant. I think we were okay in the second half. We definitely faded, I think, after the subs as well. That sort of took the sting out of it a little bit. We didn't really have much creativity on the pitch at that stage. But, I mean, it was a very good performance, though, wasn't it? And there was plenty to be encouraged about, I would say, and I'm sure you'll agree.
Yeah, and Joe, what really encouraged me was straight away from the start, we were on the front foot and we were in Huddersfield's faces. It was as if we'd really kept going after the Luton second half, where we very much played that way. And it's something that I don't think we've done enough of this season. I think we've had a tendency to start on the back foot, to invite teams onto us needlessly, really. Most of our games have started with a dodgy moment from a goalkeeper, taking very long over a clearance and playing ourselves into trouble. And it was very rare for us to actually take the lead. It's only, I think, the third time that we've actually been in the lead this season. So that was one of the most encouraging things for me. I thought we pressed very well, which is something we've very rarely done as a club. Even when we have played very good football, we've not really been known for our effective pressing game. But we really got in Huddersfield's faces, and they, I think, tried to play out from the back, not very well, admittedly. But we made it very difficult for them, and we forced them to clear it. We forced them into mistakes, and that again just helped us onto the front foot. And I thought it was just nice to see us set the tone and set that tempo very early on. I just thought it really made it easier for us to play the way that we want us to play.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the press was quite interesting, wasn't it? Because it really did work for us. I mean, there was a couple of instances where Huddersfield gave the ball away in bad areas, a bit like what we've done maybe in some games, as you've alluded to. But if we're being honest, we probably should have punished them more for that. I mean, there was the Patterson chance, I remember, especially just after we'd taken the lead, and that was a big chance where he should really have hit the target, for example. But like you say, we did start on the front foot. I think in the other two home games recently, to be fair, I wouldn't say there were too many mistakes early on as such. I mean, you look at the early season games, especially. I mean, at Blackburn it was shaky. Against Stoke, I think we conceded quite early, didn't we? I remember with Bender in the Sheffield United game, he got charged down in the first 5 minutes. So there were definitely a few heart in the mouth moments, weren't there, in some of the earlier games. But I think we seem to be coming away from that a bit now, which is encouraging. And I think we always said, didn't we, that this was going to take time. I mean, manager came in just before the start of the season, and a lot of the players have changed, and it was impossible to expect us to be the finished article straight away. But I don't think we are at this stage anywhere near that either, mind. But at the same time, I can see us making progress, and that's what we've been looking for, isn't it? And it's small steps, but I think there's things to be encouraged about, isn't there?
And that's the thing, isn't it? We're just looking for those constant just signs that we are just slowly getting better. And I thought we saw that. We probably saw that in the last two home games against Hull and Millwall, where obviously there was a real element of frustration that we couldn't get the wins, and plenty that needed to be worked on in an attacking sense. But the passing was much more solid. We were better at the back. And then, of course, we went to Luton. Obviously, you said that it's not the finished article. We were 3-0 down within 23 minutes at Luton. So definitely a lot of work to be done there. But that second half was the best I'd seen us play in ages. And I think everybody who was at Luton was just hoping, okay, can we keep that going? And, the Brighton game, we made a lot of changes, but, we'll get on to discuss that in a bit. The general consensus was that there were a lot of encouraging signs there as well in the way that we played and the way we created chances. And then you get to a game like Huddersfield at the weekend, where actually we would, I think it's fair to say, dominant. And again, first half, like we've been saying, created a lot of chances. Second half, just saw it out. And it's, again, another sign of progression. And I wrote in my column for the Evening Post of the weekend, how, it's unreasonable to expect blind faith from fans. In fairness, as much as we call for patience, etc., you do still need to see those signs that things are getting better and that things are, no matter how gradual, just moving in the right direction. And I think that is what we've seen over the last few weeks. And it's great then that we've been able to go that one extra step and get a win then and get 3 points to, again, just add to that feeling. But let's talk about the goal, because when we talk about the kind of football the Swans want to play, this is the kind of goals. These are the kind of goals that we want to see, aren't they? I mean, it was just a really nicely worked team goal, finished off by a striker who's really in form now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, it was just a lovely move, wasn't it? And I think that, that you've got to really pick out the stand-up moment has been that little flick really from Patterson that puts Pirro in. And I don't know about you, but when he gets in like that, I'm thinking, this is going to go in. You don't always get that feeling with strikers. I mean, you could probably count on one hand the amount of strikers that get in that position, and you think it's going to be a goal. I remember Jason Scotland springs to mind straight away. If he got in, you'd be like, don't worry, this is going in. Trundle, to an extent, I think he was usually pretty good in that situation. Remember Leon Knight years ago? If he got in a one-on-one, you'd be thinking, well, no problem. He has those for breakfast. Then Michu was probably one of the ultimate ones as well. But
I've heard a lot of people make that comparison over the weekend with Michu and Pirro, which obviously, that's, if you're a Swansea fan, that's as high a compliment as you can pay to a goal scorer. But do you see similarities there in style of play and the way he operates?
I suppose there is, to an extent. I mean, what I do like about Pirro is that he does get a sight of goal. He's not afraid to pull the trigger. I mean, he's not sometimes looking for that extra touch or anything like that. He'll just hit it. There'll be no messing about. And I think that's got to be quite refreshing, because I think sometimes people do just maybe look for that extra option or something like that. But you can tell this guy wants to score goals. There's no doubt in it. And I suppose there is. I can see some similarities. He's there with it, and obviously the left-footed thing is another one probably that stands out from it. But Pirro will have a bit of a way to go. We need to have the Michu in back, but he's definitely becoming a bit of a fan's favourite. And if we're being honest, I mean, he hasn't had a great deal of goal-scoring chances. A lot of them have been maybe the half chances where he's taken it. And what's he got, 5 or 6 goals, I think, so far? So it's going to be very encouraging for us, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a bit of a mix in there as well, isn't there? There's not like one type of goal that he scores. I mean, the goal that he scored against Huddersfield, a nice give and go, and then making a nice run in behind. But kind of similar, I guess, to the goal they scored against Preston, where there was a nice flick on that played him in on goal. But we've seen him score a header against Stoke. We've seen him score from outside the box against, I think, both Bristol City and Luton. So there is a bit of a variety to the goals that he's scoring as well. And I mean, that's pretty encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other way to look at it as well is there's 2 left-footed goals in there and there's 2 right-footed goals. Well, that's a bit of a Jason Scotland, really, isn't it? He could go with both feet. So that's got to be hugely encouraging, because, I mean, if you always look at Lee Trundle as a good example, I mean, incredible player and all that, but if you did force him onto his right foot, he wasn't quite the same, and that was probably a good way of trying to nullify him. Whereas it looks like with Pirro at the moment that he does favour his left, but he's not afraid to go with his right either in the right circumstance. And like you say, I mean, it probably was a little bit similar in some ways to the Preston goal, but it's 2 goals with his right foot now as well. I think that's got to be a big plus point for us, because if you are good with both feet, it's a hell of a weapon to have in your armoury, isn't it?
Yep, and just to show how good a player Joel Pirro is, he drew an apology on Twitter from one of our former directors who had previously claimed he would be the worst player that we would ever sign over the summer. So a certain Dutchman was eating humble pie over the weekend after his goal against Huddersfield. One of the players who I think everybody agrees was man of the match, Steve, Flynn Downs. Now, I thought he was fantastic. I thought he just controlled that midfield, gave fantastic protection to the back four, just killed all of Huddersfield's build-up play. I'm starting to really like Downs, I'll be honest. I'm starting to think that there's a real player there, because and just in many ways the kind of player that we haven't had in a long while, which we've been calling out for. We haven't had that just nasty player in midfield who is just an enforcer, that physical presence. And for such a young player, he seems to play with the kind of, well, he just plays like a player who's much older and possibly from a different generation, but he's got that kind of nastiness to his game and that defensive solidity. But I think he's also proven that he's a good little passer of the ball as well, and he can be depended upon when he's on the ball. And he just seems to be growing all the time, and he looks like a player who's going to enjoy playing in this style of play.
Yeah, I think he's, as you say, I mean, he's made a great impact, hasn't he, so far? I think everybody's been really pleased with him. Obviously, Russell Martin would have seen a fair bit of him last season. He was in the same division as MK Dons, weren't they, Ipswich? So obviously it's somebody that he'd made a note of. And as you say, he really did have an excellent game. I mean, there were a couple of challenges he put in that, he pulled them off to perfection, really, winning the ball for us. And like I said, just sort of destroyer of attacks. And I think as well, good on the ball. So he's an all-round player as well, really, isn't he? I think that's what's really encouraging about him, and what I like about what we seem to be doing now. We're buying these younger players who, we think they're going to improve with us, and then either hopefully they'll take us on to another level, or there'll be a resale value in them at some point as well. So I think, our strategy has started to look quite good. I know we did discuss it on last week's podcast about that, didn't we? But yeah, I think Downs could be a bit of a fan's favourite, and I mean, I've heard a couple of my mates have said as well they think he could be a future captain, really, because if you think about it, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Grimes was to move on in the summer. So that obviously means then there will be the armband up for grabs, and you'd have to say that, even though it's early days, this time next year he could easily be a very good candidate for that, couldn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he plays that way, and Ipswich are definitely missing him. They've only won once all season, so I'm sure they could, and they've been shipping goals as well, so I'm sure they could have used him this season. I mean, how impressed do you think we should be with this performance? Because obviously the other side of the coin is that the Huddersfield were poor. I mean, their fans have slated the performance as much as we say that our press made life difficult for them, and that we did brilliantly to create the chances that we did in the first half. There's no doubt that they didn't look like a team who should have been in such a high position as the one they occupied before kickoff. How much of a corner do you think we've turned, or how much of a step forward, rather, I should say, do you think this win is?
It's hard to tell, really, isn't it? I mean, you can. It's just one game, essentially, isn't it, getting the win? But, I think since the international break, we have seen signs of improvement. And if you take that mad half at Luton away, we've probably done okay in every other half of football, at least. And obviously there's been some, like the first half the other day, like the second half at Luton, where we really have shown a lot. And I definitely think there's reasons to be encouraged. I mean, I still think there could be, a few bumps in the road, without a doubt. And, this division, I mean, it's so hectic. I mean, we got another 2 games this week, and then we got another break. I mean, it can be difficult, and obviously we've had a few injuries and COVID-related absences, haven't we? I mean, we were without Ryan Bennett and Michael Obafemi the other day, and I mean, when we looked at the bench, I mean, it really did sort of show, didn't we? We're still a little bit short, and I mean, when Pirro went off, Patterson and Cham went off, and I was looking at Cullen, and I think Fulton came on, didn't he? And I just didn't see us scoring again at that point. I mean, luckily, we didn't need a goal, did we? But if we conceded, I don't think we would have been winning the game then. So, I still, there's definitely more to come from us, I think. But we're making baby steps. But we did need that win. I mean, as much as we want to see this good football, you always need some results just to keep you tied over, really. And like you were on about the blind faith earlier, and yeah, I mean, I was concerned at Luton when we were 3-0 down, for example. But I think on the whole we have started to see an improvement, and I think there's reasons to be encouraged. But as we keep saying, the phrase of patience. There's. I really don't think that we're now going to start winning every week. I think it'll still be a bit of a mixed bag, but it's good to get those 3 points on the board, isn't it? And it takes that pressure off, and the fact that we haven't won at home has gone, and you don't want that being a talking point, especially given that the next home game is, well, in my opinion, a must win. Although I'm sure you'll disagree.
No, I'm not going to disagree. Well, it's a must not lose. I've always said that about the derby. But I mean, you're right. If you go into the derby on the back of what it would have been 1 win in 11 had we not managed to get a win against Huddersfield. So that's a heck of a difference then. And suddenly you're going into the match thinking, okay, we've only lost once at home all season and won the last one 1-0. So it's much more positive, and it's definitely much more positive when your opposition has lost 5-1 in their most recent game. So hopefully both teams can continue on their current trajectories heading into the derby. But there's still a couple of weeks to go before we get to that point, so we won't get too carried away with talking about Cardiff just yet. There's plenty of time for that in future. The win against Huddersfield followed, of course, a defeat in midweek against Brighton in the Carabao Cup. Both teams made a lot of changes, as you'd expect for this match. The League Cup is low on the list of priorities for both these sides this season, I would say, at least at the third round stage. But it seemed from the highlights, Steve, and from what those who were there have been saying, that actually, once again, there were some positive signs, even though it wasn't the complete performance by any means.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I wasn't at this game, but we made a lot of changes as we expected, and which is probably the right thing to do as well, given our priorities at the moment. But yeah, there were positives from it. It just seemed a bit like our finishing really did let us down. I mean, Corey Smith in particular, really. So in that sense, a little bit frustrating. But I mean, if I'm honest, it's probably not a bad thing we're out of it. I mean, I've already talked about hectic schedule. That does mean now in October there will be a free round for us, a free week, which is probably what we need. So, we probably have to look at it like that. But we've played a decent side and given the reasonable account of ourselves, haven't we? So, it most certainly could have been worse in that sense. But I don't think any of us really expected us to go there and win, did we? So, we'll move on, won't we? And no harm done, I would say.
Do we need to be a bit worried about finishing? Because let's face it wasn't a problem last week against Luton, was it? But in midweek, I mean, we spurned a lot of good chances. First half against Huddersfield, there were some really good chances that we couldn't put away. Is this something that needs a bit of work from the Swans?
Well, I think we definitely do need to work at it. I mean, we're not scoring enough goals, are we? The 8 goals I think we've scored so far, and obviously 3 of them were in 20 minutes at Kenilworth Road. So, I mean, in general, if we carry on as we are, we're going to end up with under 50 goals, aren't we? And then, it's going to be a struggle to win a great deal of games in that sense. But, you think of it, Obafemi hasn't had many minutes yet, so I'm sure there'll be goals to come from him. So I don't think we should be too concerned. But at the same time, when the time comes and the transfer window reopens, I don't think either of us would probably complain, would be, if we brought in another creative player, because we do worry sometimes that maybe we're not going to create enough. Although in some of those games, to be fair, it was more the finishing than the creativity, really. But I definitely think in general it will take 2 to 3 transfer windows for the manager to get what he wants anyway. So we're bound to look in January if that situation doesn't improve, I would have thought.
Yeah, but I think we've seen, like I said, over the last few games, just signs that creativity is there. Just need to find that finishing touch, and hopefully, Piro's definitely got that finishing touch. Obafemi's, finding his way into back into match fitness. We've got 1 or 2 options from midfield as well. Hopefully, we'll start seeing that change. Moving on from the games that we've seen this week, not much off-field news, but the big one, I guess, is the departure of a long-serving club legend in Alan Tate. He's been here pretty much since 2002 when he would have first joined you at the Vetch. He spent pretty much his entire senior career at the Swans, but he's left this week to join Steve Cooper at Nottingham Forest. A lot of nice messages for him, Steve. I guess it wasn't a massive surprise as soon as the rumours came that he would be joining Steve Cooper. It made sense, really, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Let's be honest about it. Alan Tate, in all fairness, has come out and said that he wanted to be a manager. So being moved over to being a lone player manager was never really going to satisfy him, was it? So I think as soon as he had this offer to become an assistant with Steve Cooper, then he had to take it. Simple as that. I mean, he could have taken the option of what some other legends have done in the past and probably just thought, right, well, I've got a nice little job here now. I'll stay here and I'll probably turn into a job for life. Not necessarily that one, but a bit like with Alan Curtis, he's done various roles in there and he's left once or twice and then ends up coming back. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, Kurt never wanted to be a manager, so it's perfect for him then just to be here. And obviously, it's a club legend, everyone loves him. But I think with Tate, it's a little bit different because I think he does want to be a manager. So in that sense, he's done the right thing. But it is disappointing, isn't it? I mean, not disappointing with him, but just the situation. I mean, the circumstances really. I don't think anybody in particular is to blame. I mean, we'd have liked to have thought Russell Martin maybe would have wanted him to be on his coaching staff, but when a new manager comes in, everyone's got their own ideas, and it's a difficult one at times. I remember when Kurt himself, with the whole Paul Clement situation, and that probably wasn't dealt with very well, where it appeared he was, a lot of it was done by text, which isn't good. But I think this one was a little bit different. But I mean, Alan Tate is a Swans legend, isn't he, through and through? I mean, I did put a tweet out the other day that says it does annoy me when people get referred to as legends who quite clearly are nowhere near legends, because it devalues then somebody like Tate, who's given us years of service, 300 odd games, captained us, I think, in every division, or one of the very few to play in every division for us, played a huge part in this keeping us in the Football League, and the rise up through the leagues. I mean, he held up a certain flag in the Millennium Stadium, always gave interviews where he didn't mince his words, quite often spoke like a fan. I mean, the man is an absolute hero in my eyes. Like, and now he's not here anymore. There's no reason why he has to keep his mouth shut either. Yeah.
I just happened to see a video the other day of you say the flag there. His first match back after suspension for that flag incident when he played against Scunthorpe away the following season.
Yeah, I was at this game.
And he got sent off a couple of minutes into his first appearance back, which kind of summed up the essence of Alan Tate, really. Just this, he gave it his all every single time he's on the pitch, and he wasn't the perfect player by any means, but my God, he loved to tackle and he would give everything for the club, and he really did, and he still does. I mean, clearly he is Swansea through and through, really. And it wouldn't surprise me in any way if we saw him outside the Liberty in a couple of weeks' time when we've got a certain 12 o'clock Sunday kickoff. He's that kind of guy that he would love to be back for the derby, etc. Because he's a fan as much as he is a former player. That's what Alan Tate is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could honestly see Alan Tate having the season ticket in East Stand, but you couldn't say that about many ex-players. But if he did it, it honestly wouldn't surprise me. And that's why people love him. He just comes across as that, just a fan really, that loves it. And I've met him a couple of times. I mean, I think after the last time we beat Cardiff, I was in town and having a quick chat with him, and he was as delighted as anybody because that's him really. But I think it'll be missed, won't he? I mean, as I say, the word legends overused, and you think there's not many legends really that are working for the club anymore. I know we've seen a lot of them leave, haven't we, the last few years? I mean, obviously Trundle's still involved, and Kurt now is more the it's the life president, isn't he? He's retired essentially, which is completely fair enough at his age.
Leon,
I was going to say Leon's not there now, is he? And obviously I know Monk was there for a long time, although obviously it's quite a while ago that he left. Now Rangel is not there, Routledge is gone. So it's a bit of a changing of the guard in some ways, really. A lot of those heroes and fans' favourites, people who've given us so much and have got so much experience, aren't really involved anymore, and it's a bit of a shame in some ways, isn't it? But that's football. I suppose we have to find new heroes now to an extent. But I think personality-wise, especially, I mean, there's there'll only ever be one Tate, I think, won't there? There's certainly probably one of the most adopted Jacks we've ever had.
Yeah, he's one of the last kind of remaining so relics from the early 2000s that was still left the club. We've still got Trundle, obviously, who is, the chief of that group, really. But I was rewatching the documentary that the club made about the last season at the Vetch the other day, and you just get the impression that group of players were just off their heads, and that changing room must have been just the most bonkers place on earth. The mix of characters that you had there, and Tate would have added to the nuttiness in that changing room. It's but they've all gradually passed on and moved on from the Swans, and sadly Tate is another one. Obviously, he goes to join Steve Cooper, former Swansea City manager, his first job since he left us in the summer. What's your take on this? He's joining a Forest team who were bottom of the league when he joined them. They've gone up a bit now after getting a couple of points in the last few weeks, and helped out by Derby's misfortune. I say misfortune, their financial penalties. Are you surprised that he's gone for a club like Forest, who seem to be in a bit of a hole and need a bit of rescuing?
Yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, Forest is a great club, as everybody knows, really. I mean, it's a club with a great history, especially, and it's interesting in some ways, isn't it? With Cooper, you look at, he decided to leave here because he obviously thought that we weren't going to be as good this year, and that's probably fair. I wouldn't dispute that, but then he's left for a job where a team are bottom of the league and go through managers like there's no tomorrow. So when you think in that sense, has he made a mistake? Maybe. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on, because I think he's obviously taken a job in mid-September. The window doesn't open until January, and one of his big strengths has been bringing players in. But he's stuck with what he's got now for a reasonable period of time, isn't he? So, I mean, as I said, they've been through a lot of managers. Chris Hughton's not somebody I'm particularly massive fan of, but his record is very good, and it didn't work for him. I mean, they were obviously, Forest imploded, and that allowed us to get in the playoffs. Before that, I think Lamucci was in there, and that went wrong. I mean, there's been a lot of managers at Forest, doesn't there? And it does indicate to me that maybe there's problems behind the scenes, because not everybody can keep getting it wrong. But it'll be interesting to see how he does. I mean, obviously, he's come out and said he likes his teams to play, attractive attacking football in his press conferences. Well, I didn't see much of that down here, so he's continuing to play that line, even though, in my opinion, it's complete codswallop. But yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how he gets on. I mean, I've got no ill feeling towards him. He did do a reasonable job here. In terms of results, at least, that's probably doing him a slight disservice, to be fair. But, I wasn't a massive fan. I didn't shed any tears on his departure. But, we'll see how he gets on, I guess. It'll be, I think it's early December or mid-December that we've got them. And then the last away game, I think, is Forest. I mean, if they don't pick up by then, I mean, we could be sending him down, I suppose. But yeah, it's I think it's an interesting one with Cooper, isn't it? I mean, he probably thought he was going to have a Fulham or a West Brom job in the summer, but now he's ended up at Forest, who are obviously at the bottom of the league.
Yeah, and you said there about the habit of going through managers. Obviously, we faced them in the playoff semi-finals 10 years ago, and Billy Davis resigned pretty soon after their defeat in that semi-final. He'd been there for 2 years. No manager has come anywhere close to that since then. Just a quick list of the managers they've gone through then: Steve McLaren, Steve Cottrell, Sean O'Driscoll, Alec McLeish, Rob Kelly, Billy Davis, Gary Brazil, Stuart Pearce, Dougie Friedman, Paul Williams, Philippe Montagnier, Gary Brazil again. Some of these are caretaker managers: Mark Warburton, Gary Brazil again, Aitor Karanka, Simon Ireland, Martin O'Neill, Sabri Lamouchi, Chris Hughton. Stephen Reid took over as caretaker a couple of weeks back, and now Steve Cooper. I think it's fair to say that not many of those managers, especially the more recent ones, have gone on to better things after they left Nottingham Forest. It's not the kind of club that usually, managers use as an effective stepping stone when trying to further their career, is it? I think it's a bit of a risk from Cooper, if I'm being honest. And I mean, what was your take on Ian Holloway's comments on when he was appearing on Quest? He said Steve's had 2 seasons with an ex-Premier League team with their parachute payments, and he left the minute their striker, who was on about 70 grand per week, left. Kind of indicating what you said there, Steve, that he felt the writing was on the wall and felt, oh, I'm not going to be able to do my job here. But Holloway's obviously indicating, do you know what? He had a lot going for him at Swansea, and that would have helped him, because a lot of the takes on Cooper over the past few years has been that he's working with limited resources as well. A lot of us have disputed how limited those resources exactly were, but Ian Holloway obviously just has his doubts about Steve Cooper, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, it sounds like it, doesn't it? And as we've said previously, our budget wasn't huge, but at the same time we were carrying Andre, who was on an absolutely colossal wage for the division, and the manager was always allowed to bring players in. I mean, a lot of them were on loan, but I mean they were high-profile loan signings that he wanted. Maybe you could argue they should have signed a striker in the January, but at the same time, as I thought, we probably shouldn't have signed Jamal Lowe for me, because he didn't really suit us. So, and that was for a fee, so we could have put that to one side and bought an actual striker with that instead. So, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, because most people think that Cooper's done a brilliant job, and we're a bunch of moaners who don't deserve him, and then probably deserve to have worse results, and then it's been be lectured to about be careful what you wish for and all this crap. But Holloway maybe isn't as convinced as others, which is quite interesting, really, because I think that's sort of back in the trend, isn't it? Most people like Steve Cooper and think that we probably made a mistake and didn't appreciate him enough. But it's a game of opinions, isn't it? They say, and obviously he's got one that maybe is slightly more in line with some of the Swans fans than what a lot of the media think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it turns out for Cooper. Wish him luck, but he may need it there because he's got a pretty tough job at a club which isn't easy to manage at. Let's look ahead to Swansea's upcoming games, beginning midweek. Steve, you're going up to Fulham, Craven Cottage, a ground where we have got quite a lot of good recent memories anyway over the last 10 years. Last time we went there, we were sucker punched with a late penalty. Slight controversy in that game in terms of 1 or 2 refereeing decisions which did not go our way. Hoping for slightly better luck this time around.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, I think that was the last away game I went to before the lockdown, that Fulham one, and the ref that night, he lost his mind. I don't know what the hell he was doing. It's probably one of the worst refereeing displays I can remember at any Swans game, really. But I mean, this is going to be a tough game, isn't it? I mean, I remember reading earlier in the season that 40 million was spent in the summer in this division. Half of it spent by Fulham, and obviously over a quarter of it was spent on Harry Wilson, for example. So it just shows you the sort of level that Fulham are going to be operating at compared to most other clubs. And it's no surprise that they're towards the top of the table. I think it'd be a big surprise if they don't make the top 6. I think they've probably got a very chance of top 2. So it's going to be a tough game for us, isn't it? I mean, I think if we were offered a draw right now, we'd be very pleased, wouldn't we?
We would, but I'll be honest. This game is slightly less terrifying now than it felt a couple of weeks back. One, because our results and performances have improved in that time. But 2, there have been a few questionable performances, or at least results from Fulham. I mean, they only dropped 2 points in their first 5 games, but the last 4 games they've played, they've only won 1 of them. And drawn 1 and lost the other 2. And they've been quite unexpected. I mean, they lost away at Blackpool, and Blackpool hadn't won a single game at that point. They then beat Birmingham convincingly 4-1, but then lost really surprisingly at home to Reading. And then they could only manage a draw at the weekend against Bristol City. I mean, the stats will tell you that they probably, should have received far more points in these games, that they've maybe been a bit unlucky, haven't taken their chances perhaps, but maybe, a few signs over the last few weeks that this season isn't going to be quite as easy for Fulham as many of us expected it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I did notice that myself. They've had a few dodgy results, haven't they? But I think the thing is, over a long season where they've, got such a financial advantage, I think it's just so difficult to see them not being in there at the end. And I mean, I think it's the same for all the relegated ones. I mean, West Brom have had a good start, and Sheffield United less so. They've picked up some better results recently. And then I'm looking at another team who's got parachutes in Bournemouth, and I just think that those four, I'd be surprised if any of them are not in the top six. It does make it so much harder for everybody else, because there's less money about, isn't there, at the moment, because of all the whole COVID thing. So, it's it really does make it difficult. I think those sides, they could arguably maybe have managers that are not necessarily great, but like, I'm not saying any of them do, for example. I mean, I just think even then they'd probably get away with it because they've got such an advantage over the rest financially.
Yeah, and when you look at the team that started in Fulham's last game against Bristol City, you've got a good mix there of season championship performers and just players who are going to add them quality. I mean, they've got just their midfield. I mean, the likes of Seri, who I remember him at Nice years ago, and he just looked like an absolute star in the making. You thought he was going to be playing for Real Madrid or Barcelona, not for Fulham in the Championship, but he's had a really good start the season. Chalobah, who we know, is a decent performer at this level. Harry Wilson, who, like you said, cost a fortune, and we know that he can be a game changer at this level. Josh Onoma, who I really like. Bobby Decordova-Reid, who was clearly far too much of a cultured footballer for Cardiff, so they sold him to Fulham. And then Mitrovic up front. We know what Mitrovic can do. He's just a brilliant striker. And we spoke earlier about the way Swansea didn't have too many options to bring off the bench. Well, these are the players that the Fulham brought off the bench. Harrison Reed, Neeskens Cabano, and even Cavallero. All three of those are proven championship performers, and they could bring those players off the bench and leave the likes of Joe Bryan, Alfie Mawson, Carvalho, Fabio Carvalho, young starlet, on the bench. They've got this strength in depth, and they've got this quality running through the side that means pretty much every game they're going to be playing this season, they're going to be favourites. And it's going to be the same as well on Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you've just reeled off all those names now, haven't you? And it just shows you the challenge that we'll have and the most teams will have, because I mean, there's a lot of players there who are more than capable of holding their own in the Prem. And like I said, the other ones really are pretty standout players at this level, aren't they? And they have been on previous occasions. I mean, you look at Mitrovic as one in particular. I think he's done some damage against us a few times, and obviously he's hurt Wales as well. So that's a player that I hear his name and I'm instantly thinking, I hope he's not playing, because he's a pain in the backside. But yeah, I mean, when you've got the type of advantage that they've got financially, then that's the result, isn't it? They've got these quality players that, there's this guy sitting on the bench that walk into most teams in this division, isn't it? And that's what we're up against. And you think that I don't think it's going to change much over the next few years in terms of those relegated teams really are going to have quite a big advantage until the market picks up again, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, from Swans' point of view, who would you like to see start the match against Fulham? Are there any players who didn't start against Huddersfield who you think could maybe be in line for a start at Craven Cottage?
So that's a tough one, really. I mean, you want to reward everybody who's done well the weekend. I don't think anybody had a bad game, but at the same time, we've had so many games that you wonder, should we maybe try and rotate slightly as well, just to keep everything fresh? I mean, I'm looking at Cham and I'm thinking, again, he's not lasted a full game. Do we need to take him out the firing line, for example? I mean, I'm not saying that I want to, just more thinking that the bigger picture in mind. Can he start both this game and the game at Derby on Saturday? So we need to maybe consider one or two of those things. I mean, Ryan Bennett was out the other day. I'm not sure if he's back. I mean, if he is, then it would be a decent shout to possibly bring him back in for somebody, someone like Norton, for example. Again, I'm not picking on him especially. It's just his name is Rhys Williams, for example, going to come back in as well. So I think there's definite decisions to be made there in terms of rotating, keeping people fresh, and making sure players are not tired out really, because there's such a hectic schedule in this league, and some players have come in late in the day, and Chan being a good example. Patterson came in quite late, didn't he? So, I mean, there's some like Grimes need to be taken out. I mean, I think he's played pretty much every game so far. I mean, is he somebody that needs a rest, for example? I mean, he could be in one of the next 2 games. So I think they're the decisions that the manager has to think of. He needs to maybe not just be thinking about this game, maybe thinking about the future, that, even if we start with 1 or 2 in this game that ideally you wouldn't want to start, that wouldn't be in your best 11. It's just a case of keeping people fresh and making sure we don't take chances with players on fitness and they pick up injuries, because it is a long old season, and sometimes you do have to just think about the bigger picture, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Fulham, by the way, 3rd highest possession stats in the league, behind the Swans and Sheffield United, who've gone top of the possession table, which will probably be a great disappointment for Russell Martin. Likewise, they're 3rd in the pass completion, and they've got the most shots in the division. So it should be a really entertaining attacking game, whatever happens. Prediction-wise, Steve, do you think we can get a second win in a row away at Craven Cottage on Wednesday?
I'd love to say yes, but I do think it's quite a big ask, really, isn't it? And I don't think we will. I think the smart money is on a home win, really. So I'm going to say 2-0 to Fulham.
Yeah, Joe, I'm going to go for 2-0 as well. That's what I had in mind. I think, Fulham have dropped points over the last 2 games, but if you look at their performances, look at the chances they've created in those games, they probably shouldn't have lost any. Well, probably shouldn't have dropped many points in those 4 games. So I can see them hitting back on Wednesday night. But that form does give us a bit of hope. It just puts a little bit of extra pressure on Fulham. Maybe it's they're finding the Championship a little bit more complicated than it seemed at the start of the season, and who knows, maybe the Swans can add to their recent troubles. And then after Fulham, going to a completely different game, away at Derby on Saturday, who are bottom of the table, -2 points after they went into administration. Before we get talking about the game, Steve, I mean, the one thing everybody knows about Derby is that they are an absolute mess at the moment off the field. They've gone into administration after circling that plug hole for a long time. They've been, under so many investigations over the last few years. Very nearly went down last season. They've had to seriously cut back on their spending. Financial fair play has bitten them very hard. It's that club is a difficult one to support at the moment for their fans, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it can't be easy, can it? But if I'm honest, I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for Derby, because I look at Wickham and I think that they went down last year because of Derby, who arguably should have been, penalised earlier. So, and so the funny thing with this, right? I was speaking to a couple of friends about this. Do you almost wonder with Derby whether they would have been better just taking that hit and going down last year? Because, I mean, what is it? They're on, is it -12 they're on now? And it could go more than that. And you're thinking to yourself, right, well, when you're on that, when you get a deduction like that, you may well go down this year anyway. So then you're effectively delaying your progress by about a year when you could have just taken the hit in the first place. So, it's a tough one, isn't it, for Derby? I mean, I feel for their supporters and for the people working behind the scenes there, because they're the people that are really suffering, aren't they? And I mean, I don't have a great deal of sympathy for Derby as a club, because I think they've pulled the wool over the authorities' eyes a few times, haven't they? Or certainly that's the impression that's been given. Were they the first team, for example, to do the old trick of sell the ground and lease it back? Because I know a few clubs have done that, haven't they?
Yeah, I don't know if they're the first to have done it, but they're probably the most.
They're one of, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, Sheffield, it's quite a recent rule that you can do that, and a lot of the clubs that have done it have got themselves into a lot of trouble over it. Derby, Sheffield Wednesday, I think Reading have done it as well. It's because they've obviously sold it at a rate which wasn't reflective of the ground's actual value, as a means of kind of circumventing financial fair play rules, which is quite naughty. and a lot of these clubs have been caught for it. It's I guess some creative accounting, I think they'd call it. It's I mean, like you said, there are clubs who, just fall into financial difficulties through kind of bad luck as much as bad management. And then you have a club like Derby who, obviously you don't want their fans to suffer, but their problems have not been through a lack of money. It's, if anything, it's been through having too much money. They've tried to buy success. They've tried to cheat the system to buy that success, and then in trying to kind of make amends for that, they've ended up in this mess. Really, they've tried to cut back, but it's just been too late. And as their kind of their misdemeanors were being uncovered, they've gradually come to the realization that all these years have caught up with them. Like I said, it's very different to a Wigan situation. Derby just got too close to the sun. They tried their luck and they got caught out. Other clubs have risked everything on promotion. They've spent big and they've won that promotion, which meant they didn't have to suffer those same consequences as Derby have done. But really, it was irresponsible on their part. They knew what they were doing. They knew that they were that they were playing with fire, and they knew that if they didn't go up, that it would eventually catch up with them, and that's what's happened. And I think if any good has come out of this, it is the clubs, I think, are learning now from clubs like Derby. They are learning not to just gamble everything on promotion and to cut their cloth accordingly and run their club sustainably, and in a way that doesn't break financial fair play rules. And that does mean that the spending power of Championship clubs is much less than it has been traditionally. But it does mean that clubs are trying at least to run themselves much more sustainably, which in the long run is going to be good for football in this country. But in the meantime, we have got clubs like Derby. You're seeing Reading facing a likely points deduction too for the same kind of thing, just poor management and rolling the dice and overspending. Hopefully there are lessons to be learned from these clubs. And hopefully Derby come out at the other end of this. I don't think there's an obvious, when a club goes into administration, you're obviously going to worry about its future. But with Derby, it's not a lack of money that's been responsible for this. There's a viable club there that just needs a good owner to run it responsibly. And you get the feeling that now that they are in administration and there isn't going to be a massive asking price for the club, that somebody is going to come along and buy it, and you just hope that person is the right person for the club and that they can actually get them on the straight and narrow and looking upwards again. But I think they're going to have to go down to League One before that happens, because I mean they've had a 12-point deduction. They're going to possibly face another points deduction. There's no hope of Derby County staying up, is there, Steve?
You wouldn't have thought so, would you? I mean, for them to stay up, they're going to have to, have the type of points tally that would get you in the top six, basically. Yeah. They're going to have to win over 70 points, you would have thought. So, I actually don't think they're a bad side. I mean, I had Quest on the other week, and they played Stoke at home, and they beat them. They seem to be playing quite nice football, in all fairness, as well. So I don't think it's actually affected them massively at this stage. And I think on paper, without a deduction, they're probably not a bad side, and I'm not sure they would go down. But I mean, when you're talking about points deductions, especially the fact that there could be another one coming, it just seems very unlikely, doesn't it, that they're going to get out of it. So it's a poison chalice, really, isn't it, for Wayne Rooney in his first managerial job. There's just not really a lot you can do about it, is it? It's not really down to him. It's a management issue behind the scenes, and they've lived beyond their means, and trying to chase the dream backfired, and this is the consequences, isn't it?
Yeah, and you mentioned Rooney there. In fairness, I mean, I'm not Rooney's biggest fan. I thought, I've never been a massive Rooney fan. When he was a player, I whisper it quietly, I thought he was obviously a fantastic player, but I thought he was overrated to some extent. I think he should have done much. I think not much better, but I think he was capable of doing better with his playing career. And he had his issues as well off the pitch, etc. Wasn't his biggest fan, I'll be honest. And I never ever thought that he would be a good manager. I never looked at Rooney and thought that he had the capability to be a manager. Never struck me as particularly intelligent, I'll be honest. It was, and he was a bit of a surprise pick for me when he was given the Derby job. But in fairness to Rooney, I think considering the tough cards that he's been dealt this season, last season I don't think he did particularly well, but this season I think he's done very, very well considering the tough situation that he's got there. And certainly since Derby have gone into administration, I think we've seen a different side to Rooney and seen that actually he's got a maturity that possibly I didn't think he had. I think he's come out of this better than anybody, really.
Yeah, it does seem like that, doesn't it? I mean, he said he's not gonna walk away, didn't he? And he cited his upbringing, which was quite tough and a rough area of Liverpool, and showing that you don't walk away from things. And fair play to him. But I think from his point of view as well, managerial. I mean, it's a tough test for him what he's going through now. But at the same time, you can't really blame him for what's gone on. So he'll gain a lot of experience from this, and I don't think he's going to get fired, for example, because is someone else going to come in and do that much better? I mean, you really wouldn't have thought so, and they won't want to pay him up either. So I think he'll come regardless of what happens, even if he was to walk away at some point. His reputation will probably have still been enhanced, because you can't really judge somebody off this situation, can you? Because regardless of what he does or doesn't do, they probably look like a doomed club, don't they? And certainly in terms of for this season, anyway.
Yeah, it's very difficult to see how they can get out of this situation. But like you said, I mean, the starting lineup, actually, it doesn't look that bad. I mean, it's it's not it's a team that you probably expect to be battling relegation, but it's not we've seen far worse starting lineups in the Championship than this was the team against Sheffield United: Keller Rose, Nathan Byrne, Phil Jagielka, Curtis Davis, Buchanan, left back, Shinnie, Baird, Tom Lawrence, Sibley, Ravel Morrison, who seems to be doing okay there, and then Sam Baldock. There are some decent players there, not too many special players, but they're an okay side. I think it's the strength and depth that could really make this a difficult season for Derby. If they have too many more injuries, or tiredness kicks in, then that team could disintegrate quite quickly. But what they are is very, very, very tough to score against. They've only conceded 8 goals this season, and only Bournemouth and Coventry have conceded fewer. So Saturday's visit is going to be a very difficult one for us, isn't it, Steve? Because we have struggled to break down teams who've parked the bus and just sat back deep so far this season.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, it's probably difficult for Derby in some ways to not do that, because they've got Jagielka, who's about 39, and then Curtis Davis is about 36 or 37. So you think of it like that. There's a lot of good experience there, but they're not going to be the quickest today. And I'm looking at that and thinking to myself, well, is Obafemi going to be, fit? And if he is, even if it's for Wednesday, do just hold him back, because, with his pace, I think he could cause some problems against them. So, but it's, to be fair to Derby, as you say, they haven't conceded many goals yet, have they? So, they have done well with what they've got, I think, and it'll be an interesting one, I think, on the weekend. I think it's one of them. It's quite a tough one to call.
Yeah, I said they've obviously only conceded 8 goals. They've also only scored, I think, 6 goals, and only Hull have scored fewer. And their top scorer is actually Curtis Davis. So you'd be very.
How the hell have Hull scored fewer, out of interest? Didn't they score 4 on the opening day? They've barely scored since, have they?
They've scored 4 on the opening day, and they scored 1 against Sheffield United the day that we drew against Preston. And those are the only goals they've scored, which
God.
you'd have to be worried. They've got Josh McGuinness up front as the lone striker. You're not going to get many goals out of him, are you? You'd be worried if you were a Hull fan. But yeah, they've remarkably scored fewer goals than Derby, who, you look at their attacking options, it does make sense that they wouldn't score too many goals. And they are concentrating, I think, on just making it tough for the opposition, playing it quite safe, and then just trying to snatch goals when they can, either from set pieces or, goals on the breakaway. Two of their goals, I think, came against against Hull, sorry, actually. Now that I think about it.
They scored 2 against Stoke as well, Derby did, I think.
There we go. They don't score many, though. So, you'd hope that I think it's going to be difficult for us to win it. It's going to, we're going to have to break down a very solid lineup. But you'd think that we should have what it takes to avoid defeat, shouldn't you? It would be very disappointing if we went there and lost to this Derby team.
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, especially because we've got Fulham, which is a game that, we, in all likelihood, we're not expecting to get anything from. So you're looking at Derby then and thinking, well, we'd like something from this at least, just to, you don't want to go into the international break. And, of course, the game against the club that we can't stand on the back of 2 defeats in a row. So, yeah, I think we should definitely be looking to get something from this game. I think if we don't, we will be a bit frustrated, really, won't we?
Yeah, absolutely. With that in mind, can I tempt you into a prediction? Do you think that we've got what it takes to learn from the mistakes of, not mistakes, but learn from games like Hull and Millwall, where we did struggle to break down that deep-lying defence and that tightly packed midfield? Do we have what it takes this time around to go to somewhere like Derby and score against one of the toughest defences in the league in the opening weeks of the season?
I definitely think we can score against them. Whether we will or not is debatable. Prediction-wise, I'm going to sit on the fence. I'm going to say 1-1.
I'm going to say that we are going to squeeze a 1-0 win out of this game. I'm hoping that, now that we are finding, a bit of creating a bit more and playing with a bit more energy going forward, then I'm hoping that we will be able to find a way of breaking them down. But it definitely won't be easy, and I think we'd it would be a very good win if we could get it. It's easy to look at Derby at bottom of the league and with their troubles and say this is a game that we really should win. But I actually think it's going to be a very difficult clash, and if we can get a win away at Derby, I think that would be a heck of a result. And like you said, it would put us on a great course going into the international break, knowing that our first game back is against Cardiff in the Derby. So that's something we've got to look forward to at a future podcast. Hopefully our form continues to improve as it has, and hopefully theirs continues to decline ahead of that match. But a long way to go until then. So hopefully you can join us for our next podcast. Hopefully we'll have some good results to look back at. But until then, thank you very much for joining us.